Marty Makary opened by providing a historical perspective on the FDA, tracing its origins over a century ago when toxic chemicals and unsafe food products like mercury and cocaine-infused beverages prompted investigations. Initially a modest investigative body, the FDA has grown into a major regulatory agency overseeing approximately 20% of the U.S. economy. Its responsibilities now encompass a broad array of products, ranging from food items like mangoes crossing the border to medical devices including MRI machines and even tobacco and vape products. Makary emphasized the FDA's global footprint, noting offices in 50 countries. He highlighted the complex nature of the FDA's role, managing such a wide scope while balancing public safety, innovation, and economic interests. Despite the agency's crucial position in safeguarding health and safety, he acknowledged that it has often been hampered by political pressure and bureaucratic inertia, inhibiting its ability to be fully effective. As commissioner, Makary believes in a proactive and transparent approach, cutting through red tape to improve healthcare outcomes. Makary reflected on his appointment as FDA Commissioner, crediting a phone call from former President Trump as the pivotal moment. He described the job as one with significant societal impact where meaningful progress can be achieved swiftly, citing successes in his first 8 months, including the elimination of unnecessary animal testing and removal of artificial food dyes after decades of inaction. In his leadership style, Makary values unfiltered honesty and transparency, rejecting the typical polished political speeches expected from government officials. He credited the current administration's support, especially from members like Trump, Kennedy, and Oz, for empowering bold reform efforts. Importantly, he stressed the value of engaging with the public openly and rebuilding trust after years of skepticism, particularly due to controversial COVID-19 responses. One of the major issues Makary's colleagues urged him to address was the quality of the American food supply. He openly criticized the historic foundation of dietary guidelines, highlighting that the original food pyramid was heavily influenced by agricultural companies' interests rather than scientific evidence. This resulted in recommendations that pushed excessive grain consumption while demonizing natural saturated fats, essentially kicking off decades of refined carbohydrate overload and spikes in obesity and chronic diseases. Makary is leading an effort to rewrite the food pyramid, promising a simplified, accessible guide that dispels long-standing myths about saturated fat and focuses on protein, fiber, and quality grains. He also discussed additional public health measures like eliminating petroleum-based artificial food dyes and improving school lunch programs to combat the ultra-processed food epidemic that fuels addiction to sugar and harmful metabolic consequences. This marks a significant departure from the traditional, industry-dictated nutritional dogma. The discussion moved to the controversial figure of Dr. Anthony Fauci, particularly his role during the COVID-19 pandemic. Makary expressed frustration and anger over Fauci's misleading public statements and attempts to cover up the lab origin theory of the virus, detailing Fauci's involvement in continued gain-of-function research despite public moratoria and the political maneuvering that suppressed dissenting voices. Makary argued that millions of lives were lost worldwide due to these failures, and an accompanying climate of misinformation and polarization, fueled in part by Fauci's inconsistent messaging, contradictory mask mandates, and politicized communication. While Fauci remains a respected figure in much of the medical establishment, Makary highlighted the need for a proper investigation and accountability, asserting that closure is essential for restoring public trust. The topic of COVID-19 vaccinations elicited candid remarks from Makary, who admitted that the vaccines initially saved lives when matched to the circulating virus, but later became more controversial. He discussed vaccine injuries such as myocarditis being downplayed or censored, and internal conflicts at the FDA, exemplified by the firing of vaccine experts who opposed booster approvals for young, healthy children. Makary criticized political interference in scientific studies and emphasized the lack of open discussion, causing legitimate concerns and adverse reactions to be stigmatized and suppressed. He also pointed out the unrealistic and damaging messaging that all demographics had equal risk, ignoring the dramatically lower risk for young, healthy individuals. While natural immunity and evolving viral strains emerged, the public's trust in vaccines eroded due to opaque and flawed communication. Makary explored the troubling trend of girls experiencing puberty earlier than in previous generations, noting the historic decline in average onset age from approximately 16 or 17 in the 1800s to around 11 years old today. He attributed this partly to environmental chemical exposures that mimic estrogen, interfering with normal hormonal development. These widespread, poorly studied endocrine disruptors are an underappreciated threat with profound implications for public health and society. He linked this issue to broader concerns about medication overuse in children, lifestyle factors, and the medical system's failure to address root causes rather than symptomatically managing conditions. Makary lamented the reluctance within medicine to grapple seriously with these issues, emphasizing the need for attention and corrective action to protect future generations. Turning to hormone therapy, Makary discussed the resurgence of testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, for men, and hormone replacement therapy, HRT, for women. He noted the historical stigma and misinformation around steroids and hormone therapies, pointing out that testosterone plays a critical role in muscle mass, which is the strongest predictor of longevity. The FDA is hosting forums to better evaluate the benefits and risks of TRT, acknowledging that appropriate use can improve health outcomes without the exaggerated fears of past decades. Concerning women, Makary highlighted the long-standing medical misrepresentation of HRT that began with flawed 2002 NIH studies, incorrectly linking it to increased breast cancer risk. This misinformation caused many women to forego a treatment that relieves severe menopausal symptoms and significantly lowers long-term risks of heart disease, osteoporosis, and cognitive decline. The FDA is now advocating for a reappraisal, encouraging doctors and patients to consider HRT within the critical window of initiation near menopause. Makary described a proactive approach at the FDA toward promising new therapies, such as breakthrough treatments for certain rectal cancers that can completely melt tumors without chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery. He shared that the agency is streamlining reviews for treatments that meet high-priority public health needs, cutting administrative hurdles and accelerating decisions by directly engaging with scientific reviewers on the front lines. Similarly, gene therapy advances for congenital deafness and potential cures or treatments for type 1 diabetes are on the agency's radar, with fast-track processes being implemented to bring transformative health technologies to patients sooner. Makary emphasized the FDA shifting from a conservative gatekeeper to a facilitator of innovation dedicated to delivering tangible cures. The conversation included an examination of pharmaceutical patents and their impact on drug pricing and accessibility. Makary acknowledged that patents incentivize innovation by granting exclusivity, but criticized the industry's use of extensive patent thickets to block generics for decades beyond the original protection. He recognized this regulatory loophole as a major barrier to affordable medication and stressed the need for patent reform through Congress. Although the FDA's hands are tied on patent law, Makary supports legislative action and points to bills, such as one proposed by Senator Rand Paul, targeting patent system improvements. He underscored the substantial lobbying power of pharmaceutical companies that complicate reform, but remains hopeful the FDA's advocacy can influence public policy toward creating a balance between rewarding innovation and ensuring affordability. One of the most contentious topics Makary addressed was the emerging evidence indicating a potential causal link between prenatal acetaminophen, Tylenol, exposure, and neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism and ADHD. He cited statements from the dean of the Harvard School of Public Health, who advocates minimizing Tylenol use during pregnancy as a precaution, despite media backlash and denial from various parties. Makary condemned the media's undermining of this evidence, which he argued was silenced due to political pressures. While acknowledging that a conclusive cause for autism remains unknown, he emphasized that the FDA and the current administration are prioritizing research into autism's causes and exploring treatments that address possible autoimmune mechanisms. He advised a cautious and balanced approach in pregnancy medication use based on the latest scientific insights, Throughout the discussion, Makary lamented the toxic polarization affecting health discourse in America, worsened by politicized media and social platforms. He noted that a segment of the public reflexively denies or opposes information simply because it conflicts with preconceived political beliefs. This environment has undermined efforts to foster trust and rational dialogue on critical health issues, contributing to vaccine hesitancy, distorted pandemic responses, and fractured social cohesion. Makary reflected on his transition from a widely supported cancer surgeon to a more controversial government figure facing partisan opposition. He called for an end to this divisiveness and urged society to come together on evidence-based solutions while openly addressing uncertainties and complexities without fear of censorship or retaliation. Lastly, Makary warned of the serious public health threat posed by synthetic opioids, particularly 7-D, also known as 7-hydroxymitragynine or mitragynine, sold openly in vape stores as concentrated opioids, sometimes disguised as gummies or drinks. He explained that 7-D binds 13 times more tightly than morphine to opioid receptors, raising alarming risks of overdose and death, especially among young people. The FDA is actively educating parents, schools, and communities about this emerging danger, emphasizing the need for awareness, prevention, and early intervention. Makary sees this as part of broader efforts to tackle addiction, including sugar addiction discussed earlier, and to protect vulnerable populations from harmful substances masked as innocuous products.